Cool. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Preet, and today, as discussed, we are going to conduct this session on roadmap to learn Python about an hour. So what I'll do is I'll try to finish, I'll try to wind up in 40 minutes, and we can spend the last 10 minutes in Q&A. And during Q&A, I'll be stopping this recording so that we can discuss freely. But however, the next 40 minutes, I'll be recording this session so that the other classmates who haven't been able to attend this session, they can also refer to this recording, right? So like if you have any queries, I would request I might not be able to see the comments right now. So you can just keep it with you and we can discuss it at the end, right? So after every slide, I'll take a pause and just ask if you have any queries or something like if my voice is not audible or if you're not able to see the slide or something, I'll take a pause and I would request anyone can just turn on the mic and just say if everything's okay. Cool. So let's start. So firstly, I'll be just introducing myself a little bit. And after that, I'll be sharing what was my roadmap to learn Python. The third one is milestones to learn Python, what do we need to learn exactly when we see, when we discuss hey, how are you learning Python or what are the steps, right? So what's, I would say in the simple terms, the syllabus, right? What exactly one need to learn to be bare minimum to learn data science or to be a data analyst. After that, what is the recommended path to learn Python? And that's something I have learned after coming to US based on my experience and talking to people. Like, this is what I would do when I go back to the past, and this is what I would suggest myself to learn Python in the right way. And after that, there are some IDEs, which are called Integrated Development Environment to learn Python. And the last, I'll be sharing some best resources to download free datasets. So I'll take a pause and just ask if I was very clear throughout and you are able to see the screen. Can anyone just give a heads up?
Yes, it's
Cool, thank you. So a quick introduction about me. My name is Preet, and I started pursuing masters in fall 21 in data analytics. And my background is mechanical engineering. And just recently, I completed my internship at LinkedIn, which was for 8 months. And I was working with LinkedIn as a data analyst, right? So the crux, what I want to give through this session is, I would say, learning Python, coding, or even being a data analyst has nothing to do with your background. It has nothing to do with coding, actually, right? Everything can be learned. It's just about the approach and the discipline, right? So yeah, that's about me. And yeah, this is my roadmap to Python, like how I learned Python. So before I go into some technical stuff, let me just share you some brief, how do we define learning, right? So let's say some of you might be knowing how to drive a car, or if not a car, you might be knowing how to drive a two-wheeler vehicle, right? A bicycle or tricycle or something. So let's say if you have learned how to drive a car, right? And after that, let's say you're given any car. It can be Audi, Mercedes, or it can be like of any company. You would be able to drive it because you know how to, right? Similarly, if we take an example of a bike, it could be of any company, but if you know how to drive a bike, you will be able to drive bike of any company. The same concepts apply over here. So after coming to data analysis domain, right? The first thing that which comes to our mind, or which comes to the mind of layman, right, is the data visualization, right? We all know, like, it has, like, every data analyst has to deal with that topic. So data visualization is not a tool, it's a skill. Tableau, Power BI, Looker, ClickSense, Data Studio, all these are tools which you can use to make visualizations. These are tools where you can apply your data visualization skills, right? So in the same way, Python is just a tool, right? But data mining teaches you concepts, right? So Python is just a tool. Like when we say, like, I want to learn Python. So before learning Python, there are some concepts which you need to understand, right? So, and again, when you will go for your interviews, or when you start working with organizations, they would hardly expect from you to have the syntax like in your mind. Like, no one will ask you code verbally. You feel free to Google whatever, like, way you want to design the code. It's just that they want to know how you think, how do you frame. Like, if I ask you a question, like, I want to compare the sales of 2019 and 2020, and I want to know the year over year percentage. The moment I ask you this question, what are the thoughts that comes to your mind, right? And if you try to break those thoughts logically, is what the organizations want to know. Like, how do you solve the problems, right? So before going to Python, I first started learning with Microsoft Excel, and I still enjoy learning. Like, I'm a big fan of Microsoft Excel, and I really enjoy teaching someone how to use Excel, right? So in Microsoft Excel, here are some of the functions which, if you are familiar with Microsoft Excel, you might have heard about VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, nested if, aggregation functions like maximum, minimum, sum, right? And using if error, left, right, which which helps us to extract the left part of the string or right part of the string, and also the data types. So if you open Microsoft Excel, if you write numbers in a cell, it will be in a certain way that it's aligned, right? For example, if it's a text, it will be right aligned. If it's a number, it will be left aligned, right? So there are different types of alignments which will teach you data types, right? And after that, most importantly, visualizations. So whenever a data analyst thinks about visualizations, I think if they don't know Python, I'm sure they would be aware about Microsoft Excel, wherein they'll imagine like how those bar graphs, pie chart used to look like, right? So that's how I started using, like, that's my journey of interacting with data. After that, I came to know about SQL. I started using SQL because SQL is an English language. It's very easy. 80% of the companies across the globe, as per the data, uses SQL. They still use SQL and day-to-day activities, right? So that also helps in understanding like how to interact with the data. And then comes Python, right? So after learning these two things, it was very easy to understand the data manipulation and all those stuff, because now I just need to recall, like, let's say if I want to do something like VLOOKUP, so what is the function or what is the syntax that I need to use to implement that thing in Python? Let's say if I want to do pivot is very important, something like which we deal regularly in Python and also in Microsoft Excel. But if you don't know what is pivot and you are using Python to understand pivot, right, then that might be difficult. So the conclusion I'm trying to make is, first, one should learn the concepts. One should learn what are these terminologies. And after that, we should take help of any language. That's how I approached towards learning Python. Again, before going ahead, I'll just again take a pause and just check if I was audible throughout.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So now this was just a simple roadmap. And if you have any queries till now, just keep it with you, just take a note of it. And I'm sure we'll discuss in the end. Now, when I ask like, what are the milestones to learn Python, right? So what is the syllabus, or what exactly one's need to learn in Python? For example, if I want to learn driving, the only thing which you are going to interact is the steering. But the people who know driving, they know like every part of the car. Like, let's say if they are steering on the left or right, or even when they ignite the car, they know what's happening, what might be happening with the cylinders in the engine, how powertrain might be functioning, all those stuff, right? So when you start learning Python, this is the thing which you need to learn, or eventually will end up learning, right? So the moment a data set comes across you, you will try to judge it, like how is it structured, or is it unstructured, or thoughts will be coming in your brain, like what are the key outcomes that I can bring from this data set, right? So there might be this is very frequently we call it like garbage in and garbage out. So if your data is dirty, you need to clean it. And that's how you will be able to make some visualizations out of it, or do some machine learning on it, right? So as of now, I'm sure like none of us knows our future. We will be a data scientist, a data analyst, a data engineer. But irrespective of whatever we become, Python is a language which will be used across all the domains, right? And this is the steps, or these are the milestones which I would say not a milestone, but this is something called data pipeline, right? So if you might be like, I assume like because you are pursuing masters in data analytics, you might be familiar with the terminology called data pipeline. But if you are not, it means a pipeline through which the data has to pass. It's a point from point A to point B. Point B is the place where the data will be cleaned, the end user can interact. And point A is the point where data was just generated, right? So it could be having garbage, it could be a messy data. So when the data travels from point A to point B, what are the steps which we need to do to make sure the data is in the presentable format, something which adds value, right? When we call like, what is data science? Or someone asks you like, what are the steps you do in data analysis, right? So we can clearly see that like what we take is not data, but raw data. Raw is an important terminology, which usually people forget. So we take raw data and try to get some meaningful insights, which can be helpful for the business. So let me just go to the what are the recommended steps, like how to learn from scratch, which is the easiest way, so that you can, start learning from right now itself, so that it helps you in your project. So when I started learning Python, it took me 10 days but my approach was very rigorous. Like, I wanted to complete it as soon as possible so that I can, deep dive into the project. So So I'm going to recommend an approach, right, just after this slide, which if you follow in that manner, in that discipline, you might be able to learn Python, the bare minimum Python in 10 days, right? So again, I'll be sharing this, all the links with you as well. So if you open your, like you don't need to open it right now, but whenever you get chance after this session, go to the canvas and open the Python resources. Over there, you'll be able to see a blog or something called Python website, Python training website. So this is a blog which I've made, and let me just open this and show you. So I just made this website, in which if you click on this intro to machine learning, so I'll mention some steps. Oh, my sharing is paused. I'm so sorry. Let me stop sharing and again share the website. Mm. Is the Google Chrome visible?
Yes.
Cool, perfect. So if you recall over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I mentioned 6 milestones to learn Python. So over here, you will see 6 different steps. First is Python, data cleaning, data manipulation, the visualization, machine learning, and feature engineering. So let's say if I open Python, so each of these milestones will drive us through a website called Kaggle. So for any data scientists, data analysts, data engineers, whosoever start this journey, all of them go through this website called Kaggle, right? So there will be hardly any people in this world who are not aware about Kaggle. When I started my journey, even I was not familiar with this. So if in case you have heard this word for the first time, don't be afraid. So Kaggle is a website where people who want to learn data science and want to download data sets, they visit Kaggle. Or else there are some people who want to become grandmaster or some Kaggle master, right? So they generate data on their own. They also upload it over here so that people across the world can do some data analysis and try to bring some value out of it, right? So that's what Kaggle is. So this is actually a kind of course which you can do on Kaggle website, and it's very crisp. I know, like, if the people who are attending this session and are aware about Python, you might be having some favorite YouTubers who have taught you Python, or you might be having some favorite sources to which you always be dependent on and start learning Python from there. I know there are hell number of resources available to learn Python. And I won't say like this is the best way, but what I have found is after learning from n number of resources, like this is very crisp, to the point, and the fastest way one can learn Python, right? So what you need to do is, like, there are some lessons which you can open one by one, and it teaches you bare minimum theory and more of practical portion, which you can practice in the Kaggle itself. Like, you don't need to download any data set, go to any other platform. You don't need to install any libraries. It gives you the entire platform to just go ahead and practice coding directly, right? And yeah, so that is how you can go to each of these milestones: Python, data cleaning, data manipulation, data visualization, machine learning, and feature engineering. 10 days might be uh, like if you spend 4 hours every day, it might be possible to complete this entire session in 10 days. and you will be like able to complete your project of whatever like your teammates decide, and like specifically for this data mining session. Right, so this is the milestone. If in case you have any queries for the website that I shared, just jot it down for now, and we'll discuss it. But let me just show you something for now. I'll just go through all the milestones. Let me go through all the milestones so that the people who will be watching this recorded session can get a gist of what this uh, course is about, right? So firstly, if you are familiar with C language, right, or have came across in your school, you might be aware about stdio.h, conio.h, math.h libraries of functions, and command like printf, scanf, right? So Python is a language which is built over C, over the C language. So the base of Python is C language. Now, to understand like the Python syntax, there are some various functions and part of syntax, like you might be aware about for loop, while loop, and the way we represent data. It can be list, it can be an array, tuples, right? So there are various ways we can represent data. So this first chapter will teach you the basics about the Python. The second one is data cleaning. So whenever you download a data set, right? So till now, I assume like if in case you haven't worked previously, there are people who don't have the work experience, or just after pursuing the undergrad, they pursue the masters, right? So they might not have come across some garbage data, but in reality, 80% of the time in data science pipeline, in the data pipeline, goes in data cleaning, right? Modeling and all those stuff, it only takes 20% of the time, right? So the way the data is generated is very difficult to handle. So this is the part which teaches you that handling part, right? So how to handle the missing values, and this is the most important part where people get stuck in the format, which is about the dates or timestamp and all those stuff. Yeah, this is about the data cleaning. Then let's talk about data manipulation. So pandas is library. Again, like the people who are not familiar with Python might not know what is even a library, right? So again, I'll definitely come to that point when I'll show you Google Colab, which is a platform wherein we can practice Python. But as of now, just assume that pandas is library, uh, which like has a number of functions already defined in it, and you can use this as it is. Like you don't need to code the stuff from scratch. So pandas is a library which helps you in data manipulation, right? So what exactly we call it, like what is data manipulation, right? So anything like extracting the data and removing the garbage out of it, or let's say if you have a column wherein you have taken survey from people and they have just mentioned some sentences in English language, and you want to extract some words out of it, right? So that could be, I would say, a part of this data manipulation, right? Wherein you check the data types of the column, and just keep the columns which you want, remove the columns which you don't want. All the stuff is part of data manipulation. And after you're done with all the data manipulation, you have the final format of the table which you want, and you can go ahead and do something called exploratory data analysis. So we are not making the visualization for the end user. We are just making visualization so that we can understand the data. We as in the data analyst can understand the data and try to know like what are these columns about. For example, let's say you have a data about COVID or data about some medicines, right? But we are not doctors. We don't have the domain about the biomedical field, but we have the data from that domain and we need to bring some insights. So now we can't go and take some time, a year or some months to understand the theory and then come back to the data and try to analyze it, right? So data visualization is a part which can breach that gap and try to explain things in a simple manner, right? So professor will be teaching you like in which type of columns, which is the best way you can represent those data into correct visualization, right? So here you will be building this will teach you, right? So how which visualization to choose when, even if when you'll be taking the course called computation visualization, that's also a very good course which will go into depth about this thing, but as of now you can just get a gist. Then comes the most important part, which is introduction to machine learning. So there are various concepts like mentioned over here about underfitting and overfitting, which is a very common terminology professor will be using during this data mining course. Like once you get a data set, you also divide them into various parts, which first one is training and testing data set. So all those concepts are also covered in this introduction to machine learning, and some algorithms of making the models. After that, I won't go into deep for this too, but it's in the same way, like how to learn various models and what are the feature engineering stuff. So before the professor even teaches you, or but still you will have that mindset, or at least you'll be familiar with the terminologies, like how to select the columns, how, like let's say you have a table of 150 columns, right? And you're asked to analyze it, right? It's very difficult to analyze those 150 columns together. So how will you decide like which columns to remove and which columns to keep, right? So that's the thing which feature engineering will help you. Yeah, so guys, are we good till now?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Thank you. So yeah, this is the website which you'll be able to find in our canvas. If not, just let me know. I'll share the link. IDEs to learn Python, right? So let's say if you want to learn data visualization, right? So obviously you will download Tableau, you'll download Power BI, or whichever tool is you might be able to afford financially, and also is easy to learn, right? So similarly, to learn Python, there are plenty of tools to practice, but these are the two which you will see like most of the people use. The first one is Jupyter Notebook. This is something which remains on premise. So on premise is a term which you will listen again and again when you start working in an organization. So let's say if I download something from Google Drive, from Google or anything, and it's downloaded in my laptop. So that is called on premise, right? So it is something which I would be able to access in my laptop, but you can't because it's in my laptop. and the another one is cloud. So something which is in cloud can be easily accessible to everyone. So when you are working on a project with your teammates, if you have your project in your Jupyter notebook, your project partner might not be able to access it because it's in on-premise, right? So Google Colab is a cloud platform where you don't need to install, you don't need to set up anything, right? You can just go to that website and start implementing Python coding, whatever you want. So in this laptop, I haven't installed Jupyter Notebook, but I'll show you how Google Colab looks like. And again, if you're not familiar with what's Google Colab, that's fine. Even I was not when I started learning Python. So just like Google Docs, Google PowerPoint, and all the products of Google, Google Colab is also a part of one of their product where you can practice Python, right? This is the kind of logo, and it only requires a Google account, right? So if you want to start using Google Colab, just make sure you have an account on Gmail, which I assume everyone would be having, right? And this is how like the user interface looks like, wherein you just have to first import libraries, whatever you want to use. And after that, import the data set and start implementing the data pipeline steps, which we discussed previously, right? And once, like, let's say you're done with the projects and all those stuff, where do we need to store it? So there's a place called GitHub. I'm sure you might be familiar with GitHub. If not, I'll just show you how it looks like. So if you don't have an account on GitHub, I would say this is the first thing one should do while starting your journey with data science. So let's say like people post their photo pictures on Instagram, on Facebook, and try to know each other, right? So GitHub is the place where recruiters and hiring managers will visit and try to judge you or try to know more about you, like what you have done, what you know, right? So when you make your resume on the topmost part, GitHub will add some space, and over there you have to like hyperlink this GitHub so that people can visit and see what are the projects that you have done, right? So and this is altogether a different thing. This is not a path, not a part of introduction to Python, but I'm sure everyone is learning Python because they want to do some projects, and just doing a project just for the sake of this course doesn't add any value to your knowledge or to your portfolio. So make sure you select your project in such a way that you can proudly discuss it with any recruiter, hiring manager, even your friends or even professor, that this is the value that you are adding to the data set. And also you can write n number of things like about your project, like what are the libraries and how can an organization use your project and uh, try to bring some value to their organization, right? So that's what you need to think. So that is the place called GitHub where you can store your projects, create repositories, share the projects with people. And the most important part of GitHub, which the computer engineers used to use, is like, let's say you are working with Microsoft Excel, right? And the people who have worked with Excel are very might be very familiar with how to maintain documentation, right? So in a folder, we'll be having file.xlsx, then file copy, version 1, version 2, version 3, and even we forget like which is the final version of the file. And at the time of presentation, or when we want to share the final file with someone, we ourselves get confused, right? So that's what GitHub does. It tries to maintain those version controls for you, so that you can know like what was, like where did you start, and or which is the final code, right? And yeah, so these are some resources to download free data sets. So Python is not something which you can just learn from books, or is something which is very theoretical and you just have to practice hard coding. So to learn Python, you need a data set to practice on, right? Something which drives you. So you just need to define like what's has been your passion. Are you like, what is something which you can talk about for hours? For example, some people can talk about football or soccer, some sports, or some people can talk about, uh, cars, let's say. So you just have to define what things drive you and try to find some data set related to that. When you are learning, I'm talking about when you are learning Python, right? So at that time, if you can just go to this websites and try to search the data set which you are interested in. So let's go to Kaggle. Let's see like what are the kind of data sets are available over there. So if you're familiar about movies, right? So IMDb is something which we always refer, right? So this is the, like 1,000 IMDb movies from 2006 to 2016, and you can have that data. If you're familiar with songs or musicians or singers, so there are various categories. You can also like when you sign up for a news application or Twitter, right? It asks you some categories like what are you interested in. Similarly, when you will make an account on Kaggle, it will ask you like what are the domains you are interested, and based on that it will suggest you some data sets. So it shows biology, social science, automobile, Tesla deaths data set, gasoline and diesel prices, right? So these are some types of data set where you can download, and it shows even the ratings, like how many people have liked it or how many people have already done some projects on it. So let's say if I click on this IMDb movies, it shows one code. That means someone has done a project over here. So what makes a movie great? That is the project title that person has given. And you can also refer the code, the entire Python code, which that person has used, right? And you can try to understand. So in the beginning, this might be very overwhelming because we are not familiar with Python. So we don't even understand like what, even this is an English language, we still are not familiar, like what are these things. But again, this will take time. And if you learn this thing in a disciplined manner, I'm sure like within just a few months, one can easily become a master uh, of this. And trust me, guys, like you don't need to uh, mug up all the syntax. You just have to Google it, Google all the stuff, right? Like let's say if I want to drop a column, how to drop a column in a data set in Python. So it will tell you the syntax. You just have to copy and paste it, right? So as a data analyst, as a data scientist, we have to put our brains in how to analyze the data, right? And not in mugging up the syntax, right? That's already what Google is already doing for you. So that's not something which you might be able to add value. That's what I would say. And yep, so that with that we come to the end of a session. I'll stop the recording and maybe we can just quick chat if you guys have any queries. Thank you.